All right, ready to explore the world of personal finance, but not in the typical way you might think about it.
Oh, sounds intriguing. What's the twist this time?
Today's deep dive is all about the psychology behind money.
I like where this is going. Using any particular source material.
Absolutely. We're taking inspiration from Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Ah, that's a great one. I'm familiar with it. It really flips the script on how we think about personal finance.
Right. Instead of crunching numbers, it's more about understanding the people making those money decisions.
It's so true. It's easy to forget there are real people with real emotions behind every dollar.
Exactly. And speaking of real people, Housel starts his book with this great story about a tech millionaire. He met him while working as a valet.
Wait, the one who carried around stacks of cash?
That's the one, bragging about designing a key component in Wi-Fi routers.
Oh, yeah, made a fortune, but still felt the need to constantly show off his wealth.
You have to wonder, with all that success, why the need to constantly flaunt it?
It really highlights how money can be tied to our sense of identity and self-worth, doesn't it?
Definitely makes you think. And this ties into one of the book's central themes. Money is deeply personal.
Absolutely. What seems crazy to one person might make perfect sense to another, based on their own background and experiences.
Makes total sense. Think about the lottery.
Okay, yeah,
People spend tons of money on lottery tickets, even though the odds of winning are astronomically small.
it's true.
To someone with more financial security, that might seem completely irrational.
Right, but Hassel points out that for those struggling financially, that lottery ticket, well, it represents hope.
A tangible hope for a better life.
Yeah.
That's a long shot. But for someone with limited options, that gamble can feel worth it.
Yeah, it shows how our financial realities can totally change our perceptions of risk and reward.
It's like what feels risky to one person might feel completely reasonable to another.
Have you ever noticed that with your own financial decisions, like taking bigger risks when you're feeling financially strapped?
Hmm. Now that you mention it, I can see that pattern in some of my past choices.
It makes you wonder how much of what we consider rational financial behavior is actually driven by our emotions.
Probably more than we realize. Housel also talks about how different generations view bonds. It's fascinating.
Yeah, he talks about how baby boomers who live through periods of high inflation see bonds as a safe haven.
But for someone who's only known a more stable economic environment, like bonds might seem like a missed opportunity for higher returns.
Totally. So even something as seemingly objective as an investment choice can be influenced by our personal
That
experiences.
really shows how our past can leave a lasting impression on our financial outlook. It's fascinating. So what else did Housel have to say about those factors?
Well, he dives into these captivating stories about success and failure in the financial world.
Oh, I love a good story. Who does he focus on?
Well, he talks about John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, and then Jesse Livermore, a legendary stock trader.
Wow, those are some pretty big names in the investing world. What can we learn from their stories?
Housel uses them to show how much of financial success is actually due to factors beyond our control. Like, Bogle was incredibly talented,
Ha,
right?
for sure.
But he also happened to be investing during a period of remarkable stock market growth.
So even the best investors need a little bit of luck and good timing.
Absolutely. Now, on the flip side, Livermore, despite his amazing trading skills, ended up losing his fortune. Excessive risk-taking and leverage.
It's a reminder that no matter how smart we are, there's always going to be that element of chance in finance. So how do we balance those calculated risks with protecting ourselves from the stuff we can't control?
That's the big question, and it's one that Housel explores further with the story of Rajat Gupta.
Oh, I remember him.
Yeah, the former Goldman Sachs executive who achieved incredible success but made some unethical choices.
Ended up in prison, right?
A cautionary tale,
Sure.
for sure, shows that even at the top, it's crucial to maintain your integrity.
Housel drives that point home. So we should be careful about judging financial success or failure too harshly. There are always external factors at play that we might not even be aware of.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in that idea of individual responsibility and forget that finance is a complex system. A lot of moving parts.
Totally. Which makes me think about investing for the long term. What's Housel's take on that, particularly the concept of compounding?
Well, he's a big believer in the power of time and longevity, especially when it comes to compounding. He uses this interesting comparison between Warren Buffett and Jim Simons.
Okay, Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. Makes sense. Long-term investing is his thing. Who's Jim Simons?
Simons is a mathematician, a brilliant hedge fund manager. He's actually achieved higher average annual returns than Buffett.
Really?
Yeah, but his investing career hasn't been as long, which has impacted his overall wealth.
So even though Simons has outperformed Buffett year after year, Buffett's longevity in the market has given him the advantage of decades of compounding growth.
Exactly. Time is one of the most powerful tools in finance. Even modest returns can snowball over time. Decades of consistent compounding.
I guess that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is today, applies to investing too.
100%. Starting early and staying consistent, even with small amounts, can make a huge difference over time.
Okay, that makes me feel better about my own investing journey.
Sure.
Definitely in it for the long haul. So what about saving? Housel has a different take on that too, right?
Oh, for sure. He approaches saving less about deprivation and more about freedom and control. He describes it as like the gap between your ego and your income.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's not just about putting money aside, it's about resisting the urge to spend everything we make, especially with all the pressure to buy.
That's it. It's choosing long-term financial security and the freedom that comes with it over keeping up with the Joneses.
I've definitely fallen into that comparison trap before. It's hard to resist sometimes.
It's tough, but Housel's approach is a good antidote to that pressure. Remember, he also talks about how saving can lead to more control over your time.
Yes, that resonates with me. It's not just about accumulating wealth. It's about using it to create a life where you have the autonomy to make choices. Choices that align with your values.
Exactly. A healthy savings account can give you a buffer against financial emergencies and, unexpected expenses.
It could also create opportunities to do things you might not be able to otherwise, like taking a career break or starting a business.
Or even just spending more time with loved ones.
So saving becomes less about sacrifice and more about empowerment. It gives us the power to make choices based on what matters most to us.
That's the core of Housel's message. Saving isn't about sacrificing today for some distant future. It's about investing in your own freedom and autonomy.
This is making me rethink how I view saving. It's not about deprivation, it's about creating a life I truly want. This is really eye-opening. What else did Housel have in store for us?
Well, next we're going to delve into one of his most intriguing concepts, the idea of being reasonably rational with our finances.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. It sounds like we're about to challenge some long-held beliefs about financial decision-making.
Oh, absolutely. Get ready to explore how a little unreasonableness might actually lead to better outcomes in the long run. So we've talked about how our emotions can influence our financial decisions, even when we think we're being completely rational.
Right, like how different generations perceive risk based on their experiences with things like inflation.
Exactly. But Housel takes it a step further and challenges this whole idea that we should always strive for perfect rationality in our financial choices.
Okay, that's interesting. It seems counterintuitive to bring emotions into financial decisions. Isn't that how people end up making mistakes?
Well, that's the common assumption. But Housel argues that ignoring our emotions altogether can actually be just as problematic.
I can see how trying to suppress your feelings could lead to bad decisions too. So what's the alternative?
Housel uses a fascinating historical example to illustrate his point, the story of Julius Wagner-Jahreg.
Julius who?
Wagner-Jahreg, an Austrian physician, won a Nobel Prize for a rather unconventional treatment.
Okay, Nobel Prize winning and unconventional. Now you've got me curious. What did he do?
He was studying syphilis, a devastating disease back then, and he noticed something interesting.
What's that?
Patients who developed high fevers. Sometimes their syphilis symptoms actually improved.
So he intentionally gave syphilis patients fevers. That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?
It was definitely risky, but he experimented with inducing those high fevers by injecting patients with malaria.
Wow, that's thinking outside the box. But it worked.
It did. And while his methods were controversial, Wagner-Jahreg's success really highlights the importance of being open to those unconventional ideas, even when they seem counterintuitive.
Okay, but how does this relate to our finances? Are we supposed to start taking malaria before making big investments?
Of course not. The point is more about being okay with those unconventional choices, even when they go against the grain of typical financial advice. Sometimes, the best financial decisions aren't the ones that look perfect on a spreadsheet.
It's about finding that balance between logic and intuition, not letting emotions completely take over, but also acknowledging that money has a human element that can't be ignored.
Exactly. It's about finding a financial strategy that allows you to sleep well at night, even if it's not mathematically optimal, because ultimately you need to be comfortable with the choices you make.
I've definitely stressed myself out trying to make the perfectly rational financial choice, only to end up feeling more uncertain and anxious.
Peace of mind is invaluable, especially when it comes to money. A strategy that feels right to you, even if it deviates a bit from the textbook, can lead to better results in the long run.
So how do we find that sweet spot between logic and emotion? Any tips on making sure our emotions aren't completely derailing our financial plans?
Well, Housel emphasizes understanding the narrative of money. It's this idea that the stories we tell ourselves about the economy and the financial world can have a huge impact on our decisions, even if those stories aren't totally accurate.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more about this narrative of money.
Okay, imagine this. A time-traveling alien visits Earth in 2007, right when the economy seems to be booming. Then he comes back in 2009 during the financial crisis. He doesn't see any physical difference. Buildings, resources, everything's still there. But the economy's in shambles. What changed?
It seems like the only thing that really changed was the story, right? In 2007, it was all optimism and a strong economy. Then by 2009, fear and panic took over, and that led to a downturn.
Exactly. The collective belief in a particular narrative can actually shape the situation. Our thoughts and perceptions can be incredibly powerful, especially when it comes to something as complex as the financial world.
So our beliefs and the narratives we buy into, they can influence our financial decisions. They could even impact the overall economy. That's pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. It connects to Housel's point about all of us having this incomplete view of the world. We fill in the gaps with narratives, with stories that might not be totally accurate. And those narratives shape our choices, even if we don't realize it.
So how do we avoid falling prey to those misleading narratives? Are we destined to just repeat the mistakes of the past?
Not necessarily. Housel offers some guidance on how to navigate those psychological pitfalls. He really emphasizes the importance of understanding human behavior, both our own and others.
So it's about being more self-aware, understanding our own biases and how they might affect our choices.
Exactly. And also recognizing that the financial world is always evolving. What worked before might not work now. We need to be flexible and adapt to the changing landscape.
We need to be lifelong learners when it comes to finances, always challenging our assumptions and seeking new information.
That's the key to navigating this complex, unpredictable world of money. It's not about having all the answers, but about being open to learning and adapting.
So we've talked about personal experiences, the illusion of control, and the power of narratives. What other insights does Housel offer? What else can help us understand the psychology of money?
Well, he closes the book with a fascinating look at the history of the American consumer, starting with that post-World War II economic boom. He examines how it shaped our expectations about money and success.
Okay, let's go back in time then. I'm always curious to see how past events influence our present-day perspectives.
Housel points out that the years after World War II were incredibly prosperous for the United States. Returning soldiers were eager to start families and build a better future. The government encouraged homeownership and spending.
It sounds like a time of shared optimism and a strong belief in the American dream. Like anyone could achieve success through hard work.
Exactly. And that era of shared prosperity really impacted the American psyche. It created this expectation that upward mobility was a given.
But we know that era of boundless growth didn't last forever. What happened?
Well, the 1970s brought some economic challenges, rising inflation, oil crises, and increased competition globally. The post-war boom began to fade, and income inequality started to rise.
So the American dream started to feel less attainable. It's like the ladder of opportunity, the rungs were getting farther apart.
That's a great analogy. And Housel suggests that this shift in economic reality, combined with those lingering expectations of prosperity, created a sense of disillusionment for a lot of Americans.
Like the rules of the game changed, but nobody told the players. People were still striving for that post-war ideal, but the path was much harder.
You got it. And he connects this to more recent events like the Occupy Wall Street movement. He argues that these movements, they reflect this longing for a return to that sense of shared prosperity, that economic security.
It's a yearning for that time when the American dream felt within reach for the average person. It reminds us that our financial realities are deeply intertwined with the social and political landscapes around us.
Absolutely, it's all connected. Which brings us back to Housel's core message, right? Money isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding human behavior. our emotions, our biases, and those stories we tell ourselves about the financial world. So we've explored a lot in this deep dive into the psychology of money.
We really have, from those personal stories of millionaires to, like, historical economic trends.
It's fascinating how much our psychology impacts something we often consider purely logical money.
Absolutely. It's not just about numbers. Morgan Housel really emphasizes that.
He does, and it's so true. It's about understanding ourselves, our biases, our emotions, and how they shape our financial choices.
After this deep dive into the psychology of money, what are those key takeaways our listeners should remember?
The most important takeaway: money isn't just about spreadsheets and formulas, it's about understanding human behavior, our biases, and the stories we tell ourselves about the financial world.
We've seen firsthand how those past experiences, the narratives we buy into, can sometimes lead us to make decisions that might not be in our best interest.
It's true. Recognizing those patterns in ourselves is a big first step toward making smarter choices with our money.
Okay, so how can we actually apply this knowledge to our everyday lives? What practical advice can we give our listeners?
Housel offers a ton of great tips, but it really comes down to a few key principles. Be mindful of your spending. Don't just spend without thinking.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Take the time to consider your purchases and make sure they actually align with what's important to you.
right. It's easy to get caught up in impulse buys or feel pressure to live a certain lifestyle.
It's so true. Taking a moment to pause and reflect can be really powerful.
It can. And along with that mindful spending, prioritizing saving is key. It's not about depriving yourself, it's about building security and freedom for the future.
I love how Housel talks about saving as the gap between your ego and your income. Such a powerful concept.
Isn't it? It's about resisting that urge to spend everything you make and choosing to invest in your future.
Exactly. And saving doesn't have to be this huge burden. Even starting small and being consistent can make a difference over time.
Especially when you consider the power of compounding. What about investing? Got any advice for our listeners there?
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Housewell stresses the importance of thinking long term, riding out the ups and downs of the market, and not panicking over those short term fluctuations. Patience and consistency are your best friends.
It sounds like finding a strategy you're truly comfortable with is key, even if it's not what traditional financial experts recommend.
Exactly. Remember that story about Julius Wagner Jareg? Sometimes the best approach is the unconventional one, as long as you've done your homework.
It's about trusting your gut, but also being informed.
It is. And maybe most importantly, it's about defining what success really means to you.
Oh, that's so important. It's about figuring out your own financial goals and what you want your money to achieve for you and your family.
Exactly. Once you have that vision, it's much easier to make choices that support it, and those choices might look different for everybody.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to money.
Absolutely. The important thing is to find what works for you, what gives you peace of mind, what allows you to live a life you're happy with.
So much great advice from Morgan Housel.
He really provides a different perspective on personal finance, one that goes beyond just the numbers.
Before we wrap up, I have one final question for our listeners. Knowing that money is as much about psychology as it is about numbers, what financial decisions have you made that might have been driven more by emotion than logic?
It's a question we should all ask ourselves. We all have those moments where our emotions influence our choices, especially when it comes to money.
It's about being aware of those tendencies and bringing more intention and balance to our financial decisions. This has been such an incredible exploration into the psychology of money. And if you want to learn more, we highly recommend checking out Morgan Housel's book.
The Psychology of Money, it's a great read.
It will definitely make you think differently about your relationship with money.
And until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep.